Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Neil Blumenthal. I'm one of the guys that started Warby Parker and currently serve as its co-CEO. Thought I would share a couple lessons that we've learned along the last sort of 3.5 years of this wild ride that we've been on. Just to give you some context, we're based here in Soho, a few blocks away. We have about 300 employees now. We started in February 2010. We sell sort of what we think are beautifully designed eyeglasses. We try and sell them for a lot less than most people sell glasses for. And for every pair of glasses we sell, we distribute one to someone in need. We've now distributed over 500,000 pairs of glasses to people in need around the world. And the question that I'm frequently asked is sort of, where did the idea come from? And like with many businesses, it really comes from sort of a passion, an idea, and a frustration. So there were 4 of us that started the company, Jeff, Andy, Dave, and I, and we all loved glasses. The one thing, though, is that we didn't love buying them. We thought that the purchase process was flawed. You'd walk into an optical shop. It always felt a little awkward because you were sort of singled out and you had all this direct attention. It wasn't like buying other sort of fashion accessories. Often the glasses were in a glass display or behind the counter, out of reach. There wasn't much price transparency, so you'd go and you'd select a pair of glasses and you get really excited. You'd ask what the price was and you get slightly more deflated because you'd realize, oh, this is $300. And then they'd say, oh, but with lenses it's now $400, $500, and you'd walk out of the store really feeling like you'd been ripped off. Jeff, Andy, Dave, and I were in business school. We were in the computer lab, and Dave was talking about how he recently lost a pair of glasses in the seat pocket of an airplane. And lo and behold, Jeff had a similar story about how his glasses were sort of broken. Andy had this great idea to sell glasses online, and it was this eureka moment where the light bulbs went off, and it was like, wow, we could perhaps do something here. I had previously launched was the second employee at a nonprofit that distributed eyeglasses in the developing world and spent a lot of time designing and manufacturing glasses for people living on less than $4 a day. So knew a little bit about the industry. And ultimately, this was sort of the bedrock of Warby Parker, this idea that glasses should not cost as much of an iPhone, and that we could indeed deliver them direct to consumers sort of online and bypass the middleman and bring down prices. So, in this instance, we thought that we could sort of transform an industry that really hadn't had much innovation recently. When we look at other great businesses around, we find sort of these similar stories. So I'm reminded of this one guy who was recently sort of telling this story about how he had rented Apollo 13 from his local video store to watch it on date night with his wife. Went to work the next day, forgot to return it, sees his credit card bill, gets hit with a $40 late fee, so embarrassed, he doesn't tell his wife. Next thing you know, he's launched Netflix. You think about another guy is trying to buy a cool pair of Nikes, goes to sort of Nike ID, where you can actually have words printed on a shoe, decides to mess around, see if he can get sweatshop actually sort of printed on the shoes. Lo and behold, he has this sort of crazy email interaction with some of the people working at Nike, sort of saying like, oh, well, you can't really use obscenities. And he's like, well, a sweatshop is not really an obscenity. It's, a place where workers are exploited. And he has this crazy email interaction, and he found it pretty amusing, so he emails it to a few of his friends. It, like sort of those fun emails, ends up going everywhere, and sort of realized sort of the power of content to go viral and share, and realizing that there aren't great platforms for sharing good content. So he goes and founds BuzzFeed. So I share a few of these examples really to sort of mention as you're thinking about starting a business, or even in your everyday work, or once your business is already started, really always think about how can you solve real problems. And this doesn't have to be some crazy idea on how you're going to get people to Mars, or get people from New York to LA in 3 minutes. It's just how are you going to make people's lives better? And one of the tools that we often think about is what are frustrations that we're having. And if you actually write down a couple frustrations every day, by the end of the week you have a couple dozen, by the end of the month you have scores. And you can go through those and prioritize to just figure out, is there an opportunity here for us to solve a real problem? And if so, there might be a great business behind that. Once indeed you do sort of come up with this idea, how do you shout it from the rooftops? We were working on Warby Parker for 1.5 years before we launched, and we would tell everybody that we knew that we were creating this new lifestyle brand, that we were designing glasses, we were going to sell glasses for a fraction of the price. And sometimes people look at us and say, why are you telling everybody this? Like, it's going to get out, and there's going to be all these people launching before you. And our thought process was, you know what, like, we think we're smart, but we're not that smart, right? There's other people on the planet who have similar ideas. Frankly, if that idea is too novel, chances are the market's not ready for it, right? And you're always going to be having other people sort of working on similar concepts, and it comes down to execution. And you can only execute at sort of your highest level if you have the support of your network, the support of your friends and your family. And they can only support you if they know what you're working on. So we would constantly tell everybody about the details, because you can be proactive and ask your friends, hey, I know you know more about SEO than I do. Can you tell me about it? But if they know what you're working on, they can volunteer and proactively help you answer questions. They can introduce you to people. So we found that shouting it from the rooftops was really helpful. The other thing that we were faced with when we were preparing for launch was that we were doing a lot, and there was a lot of messages. We were creating a lifestyle brand that stood for fun, creativity, and purpose. We were selling glasses for $95 instead of $500. We were going to offer really great customer service. We were doing a home try-on program where you could select 5 frames, we ship it to you free of cost. We were distributing a pair of glasses for every pair that we sold. We were going to be a B Corp. We were going to be carbon neutral. There were just a bazillion different messages there, and the question was would people hear those messages? So we spent a lot of time just thinking about how can we create a hierarchy here, because you only have a few moments with potential vendors, potential customers, potential partners. How are you going to get that message through? So we thought about how do we prioritize this? Well, how do customers shop for glasses? First and foremost, they check, do these look good on your face? So we say, well, we're a fashion brand first. Second, they ask, well, how much does it cost? Is it good quality? So second, they're $95, including polycarbonate anti-reflective lenses. We have cellulose acetate from Italy, 5-barrel hinges with Teflon-coated screws, free shipping, free returns. And then we thought that actually during that initial purchase, most people really aren't thinking about the social mission, and it's probably not driving that initial purchase. So that's often the last thing that you hear about us. Not that it's not really important to us, and not that it's not what motivates me to come to work every day, but it wasn't the first thing that we need to tell customers. So just thinking about how you simplify messages, how do you prioritize, is just something to always keep in the top of your mind. So, couple sort of thoughts here is just how do you break down decisions into bite-sized pieces? When you look at Apple, what makes Apple so great? It was years of Steve Jobs yelling at people, simplify, 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 reduce, reduce, reduce. When you think about the launch of the iPhone, there were so many things an iPhone could do, but he really just focused on 3. Number 1, it was a phone. Number 2, it sort of played music. And number 3, it could take photos. So it's just, you're to some extent, you're sort of growing and building this baby, and then you kind of have to kill it a little bit, at least from sort of a messaging standpoint. Then often we always find ourselves on sort of the precipice, about to step off this giant cliff, and it's incredibly scary. When that happens, sort of take a step back and think about, how can I break down this big decision into baby steps? Early on, we were trying to build a website. None of us had ever built a website before. It was pretty complicated. We didn't know much about user experience. We didn't know much about coding. None of us were software engineers. But we started to talk to people and really understand, how do you actually go about building a website? And we realized that there was 3 distinct skill sets. There was sort of the user experience and sort of the functional requirements you need to build. There's the sort of graphic design and how do you make it visually appealing. And then lastly, there's the technical aspect of actually building it. So we spent a lot of time ourselves in the first part where we would actually map out each wireframe on PowerPoint. We'd print it out and we'd go up to people and say, hey, this is the home page. What button would you press? And flip to the next page. Oh, that takes you to the gallery page. What button would you press? Takes you to the product page. And by doing that, we were able to, in a really inexpensive manner, sort of user test, A/B test, figure out what we could do. But it also helped us just create a really specific scope of work. And one of the reasons why when you go to vendors, the price is often so high is because they often believe that what you're telling them is not everything that you want. So they bake in a lot of buffer. When you have a really specific scope of work, you're able to get lower prices. So then we took that, we went to my friend's younger brother who was a designer and said, hey, make this pretty, and then went from there to go to sort of a development house to build it. We ended up getting proposals from 4 different development houses, 3 of which were pretty expensive, 1 of which was half the price of everybody else. So being, smart MBAs, we said, go with the lowest price. Sure enough, 6 months later, we had to fire them. All the work was crap, and went back to the drawing board. But just, the lesson there is, how do you just break down things into smaller pieces? The other thing is just thinking about when you have these major moments. And this is a little bit in conflict with this idea of not taking giant leaps. But at some point, right, some of those steps are maybe shoulder width apart as opposed to a baby step. So for us, that was actually launching the website and going live. And the question was, what did we need to actually do this? We thought it was really just 3 things. One was the product to sell, the second was the website, and third was PR support. Because we were launching a lifestyle brand, we felt like we only had one shot to do that. So we spent a lot of time, we were down in Philadelphia when we were working on this, and I'd come to New York, at least once a week to meet with PR freelancers and firms. Met with 40 different ones before we settled on one, and it really helped us sort of propel the launch. So when we launched to Features in Vogue and GQ. The company took off like a rocket ship because the brand was introduced through the right mechanism. So I say that as an example of what are going to be critical moments in the life cycle of your business. Now your business is launching, you're sort of humming along, you start to realize, oh, there are competitors, our competitors do X, Y, and Z, that's just how everybody does it. We were thinking about our first fashion presentation, and at the time, Fashion Week was sort of in Bryant Park under the tents, or you do a presentation like at Milk Studios. We decided to do something a little different. We did a sort of renegade guerrilla presentation at the New York Public Library. Why the New York Public Library? Because that's where we discovered the sort of 2 characters for which Warby Parker is named, Warby Pepper and Zag Parker. They're 2 early Kerouac characters. We thought we could go back to the library. We rented a room at the Bryant Park Hotel a block away, did hair and makeup, snuck in a bunch of models, invited a bunch of editors, and at 3:30 on the dot, we had all the models put on their glasses and lift up these books with these book covers in it, which is sort of Our Blue, which is inspired by the feet of a blue-footed booby. And it had the frame name by Warby Parker. And there were all these different elements of the story. We also decided to do this the day before Fashion Week started. And we got a ton of press and a ton of attention, and really felt like we stole the day, even though we were such a small brand and had such limited resources. Another example is right now there is a big yellow school bus riding around the country. It's been to 10 cities over the last 8 months, and we're selling glasses out of it, and we call it the Warby Parker class trip. And we've gotten just a ton of attention. When we roll up into a city, we're able to get local press, we're able to build relationships with a bunch of different local organizations that we feel sort of share Warby Parker's values, and we're sort of increasing awareness while driving sales, again, doing something very differently. So when I think about what can you do that really stands out, how do you constantly think about everything that you're going to do? Is there something that hasn't been done before, or that you can learn from somebody else and do it slightly differently? We were chatting in our creative team, and one of our graphic designers was talking about how every year he does an infographic and sort of spells out the last year of his life. And it's just sort of the way he keeps his diary. He works on it for about 3 weeks, and sort of just as it's a time for him in December to reflect back on the past year. And we thought, wow, this is absolutely brilliant. So we decided to create an annual report. We're a private company, so we don't share financials, but we thought that we could share a bunch of different pieces of how we're operating the company. What are the busiest call volume hours during the day? What are the busiest days during the week? What beer do we drink during our happy hour? Just give people a chance to take a look behind the curtain. And what we found was that an initiative that we thought was just a way to engage with existing customers ended up getting shared really widely. And we ended up hitting basically achieving our 3 highest days of consecutive sales just by sort of doing this sort of interactive report, because it got shared so widely. And we reflect back, and it wasn't really our intent. And it was this almost deliberate serendipity where if you're doing stuff that's interesting and that's different, that also has sort of the customer in mind, that good things sort of happen. Positive unintended consequences occur. For us, this was really about being vulnerable. How can we put ourselves out there and build trust with our customers? And we think about vulnerability a lot because that's how human beings build relationships, right? You build trust by giving it away. And we thought that brands can do a far better job of that rather than just sitting in the Ivory Tower and creating beautiful glossy ads to be in Vogue and Elle and W. Yes, it's important to paint that aspirational lifestyle, but if you want to build really deep relationships, you have to show some warts. So just a couple thoughts there is, how can you be remarkable? And Seth Godin recently did a blog post about this. Being remarkable is different than being differentiated. Being remarkable means that people want to remark and talk about you and your product and what you're doing. So in this instance, creativity wins. And we're all in a more competitive marketplace. And you have to think about customer experience really as a form of entertainment. Do people want to spend their time sort of learning about what you're doing, buying your product, using your service, or can they just do it somewhere else for either less money or more fun? And it's really for this reason why I think New York and creatives in particular are so well positioned to take advantage of sort of the tech revolution that we're in the middle of. There's a lot of disruption, particularly in my industry, in fashion, where you have some people entering fashion that typically would never have, but they're trying to use technology to do that. Retailers are still very confused about how technology plays a role in their future, so then you also have technologists coming in. At the end of the day, one of the advantages that creatives have is that they're always thinking about emotional reactions, and they're always evoking these emotions, and that's really hard for technologists and business folks to fully get. So as creatives, we have a distinct advantage. It's just the question of how can we sort of adapt a bunch of the other skill sets, or at least know enough about those other worlds that we can take advantage of that. So with that, thank you for your time. We're going to open up to Q&A, but if there's any sort of big lessons here, it's how do you be remarkable? How do you create awesome experiences? How do you sort of be authentic to who you are? How do you solve real problems? And how do you simplify seemingly very difficult decisions? So, thanks.